I remember the exact sound of the television in the background when my family finally threw me away. It was a Tuesday evening, 3 days before Thanksgiving. I was standing in my kitchen in Chicago, holding a spatula in one hand and my phone in the other, watching the snow pile up on the windowsill. I had my flight booked. I had my bags half packed. I had spent the last 2 weeks working grueling 12-hour shifts at the regional supply chain hub just so I could clear my schedule to fly back home to Connecticut. Then my phone vibrated. The caller ID said Mom. I answered with a smile. I always did. I always thought maybe this time, things would be different. Maybe this time she was calling to say she missed me. Hey Mom, I said, setting the spatula down on the counter. I was just making dinner. Did you need me to pick up anything from the city before I fly out on Thursday? On the other end of the line, I heard the faint, canned laughter of a sitcom. I heard the wet, rhythmic smack of my mother chewing her peppermint gum. There was no warmth in her silence. There never was when it came to me. Cancel your flight, Sutton. Her voice was flat. Bored. Like she was telling me to pick up a different brand of milk at the grocery store, not blowing up my holiday. My stomach dropped. The familiar cold dread that always accompanied conversations with my family started pooling in my chest. What do you mean cancel my flight? Mom, it is a non-refundable ticket. Thanksgiving is in 3 days. Did something happen? Is Dad okay? Your father is fine, she snapped, her tone dripping with sudden irritation. It is Waverly. She is pregnant, as you know, and her event planning business is going through a rough patch right now. She is stressed. She is fragile. I closed my eyes and rubbed the bridge of my nose. Waverly was my older sister. The golden child. The one who could do no wrong, even though she had never held a real job for more than a year and spent money like it grew on trees in our backyard. Okay, I said slowly, trying to keep my voice even. I am sorry she is stressed. But what does that have to do with me coming home for Thanksgiving? The smacking of the gum stopped. I could picture my mother narrowing her eyes at the wall. Because you always bring drama, Sutton. You are always questioning things, always making Waverly feel bad about her choices. We are going to have a peaceful holiday this year. Waverly needs a calm environment. I am not going to let you ruin her pregnancy with your negativity. My breath caught in my throat. Drama? When did I ever cause drama? Was it when I asked why Waverly got a brand new car while I had to take out student loans? Was it when I quietly sat in the corner during family dinners while they praised her for just breathing? Mom, I have not even spoken to Waverly in 4 months, I pleaded, hating how desperate my voice sounded. Hating that at 28 years old, I was still begging for a seat at my own family dinner table. I already paid for the ticket. I have nowhere else to go. Her next words were a physical blow. They hit me so hard my knees actually went weak. Then go nowhere. I do not care what you do, Sutton. But you are a toxic burden to your sister, and I will not have you in this house. Do not come home. Click. She hung up. She actually hung up. I stood there in the quiet of my apartment for a long time. The only sound was the humming of my refrigerator and the distant wail of a police siren on the snowy streets below. I looked down at my phone. The screen went dark, reflecting my own face back at me. A face that looked tired, defeated, and entirely alone. I was the regional director of supply chain for a major logistics firm. I managed millions of dollars in inventory. I handled warehouse fires, trucking strikes, and system crashes without breaking a sweat. I was respected. I was tough. But right then, I was just the scapegoat. The invisible daughter who had just been erased from the family portrait so the golden child could shine a little brighter. Have you ever been uninvited to your own family's house? Have you ever been told your mere existence is toxic by the woman who gave birth to you? Let me know in the comments. But keep watching, because this was just the beginning of a nightmare that would eventually become my greatest victory. I wish I could tell you that this was a shocking, out-of-the-blue event. But the truth is, this Thanksgiving rejection was just the latest exhibit in a long, painful museum of memories. My entire life had been a series of moments where my parents made it crystal clear where I stood. I was the understudy, the backup plan, the bank account. I walked over to my kitchen island, pulled out a stool, and sat down in the dark. The memory of my 18th birthday hit me first. I had worked 3 part-time jobs during high school. I studied until my eyes bled. When I finally received a letter saying I had won a $5,000 academic scholarship for college, I ran home crying tears of joy. I thought my parents would finally be proud of me. I thought they would finally look at me the way they looked at Waverly. Instead, I walked into the living room to find my mother crying and my father pacing. Waverly, who was 20 at the time, had just decided she wanted to open a luxury nail salon. She had no business plan. She had no experience. All she had was a Pinterest board and a tantrum. My mother looked at my scholarship letter, then looked at me with red, pleading eyes. "Sutton," she had said, clutching my arm. "Your sister needs this. You are so smart, you can just get student loans. But Waverly needs a head start. If you do not give her that check, her dream will die." My father, Harrison, stood in the corner, staring at the floor. He never fought for me. He just wanted peace, and peace meant keeping my mother and sister happy. "Give it to her, Sutton," he muttered, not meeting my eyes. "Be a good sister." I signed the $5,000 check over to Waverly. 2 months later, the nail salon folded because she spent the entire budget on imported Italian leather chairs and forgot to pay for licensing. The money was gone. My parents never apologized. I spent the next 4 years working night shifts at a freight yard to pay for my textbooks. Then there was my college graduation. I was graduating summa cum laude, top of my class in supply chain management. I was the first person in our family to actually earn a degree, since Waverly had dropped out of 3 different programs. I sent my parents the invitation months in advance. I saved up to buy them front row tickets. When my name was called to walk across that stage, I looked out into the sea of proud parents. I scanned the front row. 2 empty chairs. They did not show up. They did not even call to tell me they were not coming. I accepted my diploma with a frozen smile while my heart shattered into a million pieces. When I finally got them on the phone 3 hours later, my mother sounded annoyed that I had interrupted her day. "Waverly had a panic attack, Sutton. The salon messed up her hair highlights and she was hyperventilating. We could not just leave her alone in that state. A piece of paper from a college is not more important than your sister's mental health. Stop being so selfish. Stop being so selfish." That was their favorite weapon. Anytime I asked for basic human decency, I was selfish. I was dramatic. I was toxic. I shook my head to clear the memories, opening my eyes to my dark apartment. I reached for my phone, intending to text my boss Tamsin to see if she needed me to work over the holiday. But a new notification popped up. A voicemail from my Aunt Fallon. Aunt Fallon was my mother's younger sister, and the family's designated flying monkey. If my mother wanted to spread a narrative, Fallon was the broadcaster. I hit play. "Sutton, honey," her sugary, condescending voice filled the quiet room. "Your mother just told me you threw a fit and canceled your trip home because you are jealous of Waverly's baby." "Really, Sutton? You are almost 30. It is time to stop competing with your sister. She is building a family and you are just, well, sitting in warehouses. Do not call your mother until you are ready to apologize and act like an adult." I deleted the voicemail. I did not cry. I think I was too numb to cry. They had crafted a beautiful little lie to make themselves the victims, and they were already rallying the troops to isolate me. If I wanted them to love me, I would have to apologize for a crime I did not commit. I would have to beg to be allowed back into my designated role as the family punching bag. I looked at the non-refundable plane ticket sitting on my counter. I picked it up and threw it in the trash. I was done shrinking myself to fit into a family that only wanted me when they needed a rug to step on. I thought I had nothing left to lose that night. I was terribly, wonderfully wrong. Thanksgiving Day arrived in Chicago with a bitter, biting wind. The city felt abandoned. Everyone was indoors, gathered around massive tables with turkeys and gravy and people who loved them. I was at Harborview Grill. It was an upscale, old-school diner that stayed open for the holidays. It had dark wood booths, dim lighting, and an atmosphere that felt heavy with the quiet loneliness of the few patrons sitting inside. I sat in a corner booth by myself. The waitress, a kind older woman with tired eyes, brought me the Thanksgiving special. A plate of cold-looking sliced turkey, a scoop of mashed potatoes that had clearly formed a crust, and a dollop of canned cranberry sauce. I stared at the food. My phone sat face down on the table. It had not buzzed once all day. Not a single message from my mother, my father, or my sister. The silence was deafening. It confirmed what I had always feared. They did not miss me. They were probably relieved I was gone. I picked up my fork, but my hand was shaking so badly I dropped it. It clattered loudly against the porcelain plate. The sound echoed in the quiet restaurant. And suddenly, the dam broke. I put my hands over my face and started to cry. It was not a delicate, pretty cry. It was the ugly, chest-heaving sobs of a woman who realized she was entirely orphaned despite having 2 living parents. I tried to muffle the sound with a napkin, turning my face toward the frosted window, praying nobody would look at me. "Excuse me." The voice was sharp but warm, cutting through my quiet breakdown. I froze, keeping the napkin over my face. I lowered the napkin slowly. Standing next to my booth was a woman in her early 60s. She had striking silver hair, piercing blue eyes, and an aura of someone who did not take nonsense from anyone. She was wearing a tailored blazer that probably cost more than my first car. I swallowed hard, trying to wipe my eyes. "I am so sorry," I whispered, my voice thick. "I am fine. Allergies." The woman raised an eyebrow. "I am a retired corporate attorney, sweetheart. I can spot a lie from a mile away. You do not have allergies. You have a broken heart." Before I could respond, she pointed toward the large, circular booth a few feet away. Sitting there was an older man with kind eyes and a salt and pepper beard, and a younger man in his early 30s with a warm, open face and broad shoulders. They were watching us with gentle smiles. "Nobody eats alone today unless they want to," the woman said, her voice softening just a fraction. "I am Greer. That is my husband, Sullivan, and our son, Beckett. Pull up a chair, kid." I shook my head frantically. "Oh no. No, I could not impose. You are having a family dinner. I do not want to intrude." Greer did not move. She crossed her arms. "I did not ask if you wanted to intrude. I told you to pull up a chair. Now, are you going to make me drag you over there, or are you going to walk on your own 2 feet? The turkey at our table is much better than that sad plate they gave you." I looked at her. Really looked at her. There was no pity in her eyes. There was only a fierce, demanding kindness. A kind of motherly authority I had never experienced in my entire life. I wiped my face, picked up my purse, and followed her. As soon as I slid into the booth next to Beckett, the dynamic shifted. They did not ask intrusive questions. They did not pry about why a 28-year-old woman was crying into cold potatoes on a major holiday. Instead, Sullivan poured me a glass of expensive red wine, and Beckett passed me a basket of warm rolls. "So," Sullivan said, his eyes crinkling at the corners, "Greer tells me you were crying because you realize the Chicago Bears are going to lose on Sunday." I let out a startled, wet laugh. "Something like that." "I am Sutton," I said, taking a sip of the wine. It tasted like heaven. "Sutton," Beckett repeated. He had a deep, calming voice. "I am Beckett. I design warehouse robotics." "What do you do?" I blinked. Usually, when I told my family what I did, their eyes glazed over. "I am the regional director of supply chain for Apex Logistics," I said softly. Sullivan stopped cutting his steak and looked up, his eyes widening with genuine respect. "Apex? You manage the Midwest Corridor? That is a brutal sector. You must have a mind like a steel trap to keep those freight lines moving." I felt a sudden, unfamiliar warmth spread through my chest. Validation. He actually knew what my job meant. "Yes, sir. It is a lot of late nights and putting out fires, but I love it." I worked my way up from the loading docks. Greer smiled, a sharp, proud smile that made my breath catch. "From the docks to the boardroom. That takes grit." I like grit. We talked for 2 hours. They told me about their lives. Sullivan had built a massive freight hauling company from a single used truck. Greer had defended corporate whistleblowers. Beckett talked passionately about automated sorting systems, and we ended up debating the efficiency of conveyor belt algorithms over pumpkin pie. For the first time in my life, I felt interesting. I felt valued. I felt like I was allowed to take up space without having to apologize for it. When the waitress brought the check, I reached for my wallet. I was used to paying for everyone. My mother always conveniently forgot her purse when we went out. Greer snatched the leather booklet before my fingers could touch it. "Put your plastic away, Sutton." "But I had a full meal," I protested. "Please let me pitch in." Sullivan chuckled, putting his hand over his wife's. "Let the woman pay, Sutton. When Greer decides you are part of the table, you do not argue." As we stood outside the diner on the snowy sidewalk, buttoning our coats, Greer reached into her pocket and handed me a thick, matte black business card. "We have Sunday dinner every week at our house," she said, her blue eyes locking onto mine. 5 o'clock sharp. If you do not show up, I will use my old legal connections to track you down. Do you understand me? I looked down at the card. It had her name, her address, and her personal cell phone number. I traced the embossed letters with my thumb. "I will be there," I whispered. "Thank you." I got into a cab that night feeling something I had not felt since I was a little girl. Hope. I started going to Sunday dinners at the Morrison house. At first, it felt surreal. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. I kept waiting for Greer to demand a favor, or for Sullivan to criticize how I chewed, or for Beckett to tell me I was taking up too much of their time. But weeks turned into months, and the shoe never dropped. Sunday evenings became my sanctuary. Sullivan taught me how to play chess in his massive oak-paneled study, refusing to let me win but always praising my strategy. Greer taught me how to roast a chicken properly, standing beside me in her apron, swatting my hand when I reached for the wrong seasoning. And Beckett. Beckett became my anchor. He was not a loud, flashy guy. He was quiet, brilliant, and incredibly observant. If I showed up to Sunday dinner looking exhausted from a brutal week at the logistics hub, Beckett would silently hand me a cup of black coffee and steer the conversation away from work. We started texting. Then we started getting drinks on Wednesdays. Then he came over to my apartment to fix a leaky faucet I had been ignoring, and he ended up staying until 2 a.m. while we watched terrible sci-fi movies on my couch. For the first time in my 28 years of existence, I was happy. I was not walking on eggshells. I was just Sutton. My biological family had not reached out once since Thanksgiving. No Christmas card. No text on my birthday in February. They were sticking to their silent treatment, punishing me for not crawling back and begging for forgiveness. I let them. I was too busy building a life that actually felt like mine. In late spring, I decided it was time to put down roots. I was making a 6-figure salary, I had zero debt, and I had a perfect credit score. I applied for a mortgage to buy a beautiful little townhouse near the river. I was sitting in my office reviewing freight manifests when my mortgage broker called. "Sutton," the broker said, his voice tense. "I have some bad news. The bank denied your application." I stopped typing. "What?" "That is impossible. I have a massive down payment and my credit score is near 800. "Not anymore, it isn't." He sighed heavily. "I just pulled your report. Your score tanked by over 200 points. You have a massive commercial loan in default under your social security number. It looks like it is severely past due, and it is dragging your entire financial profile into the gutter." The blood drained from my face. The room suddenly felt very cold. "What commercial loan?" "I never took out a loan. It is registered to a business called Waverly Elite Events," he read off the screen. Ring any bells? My heart stopped beating for a full 5 seconds. A cold, nauseating horror washed over me. Waverly Elite Events. My sister's struggling business. Before I could even process the magnitude of what I was hearing, my personal cell phone lit up on my desk. It was an unknown number, but the area code was from Connecticut. Still in a state of shock, I swiped to answer. It was Waverly. But she wasn't talking to me. She had pocket-dialed me, but dialed me. The line was open, and I could hear her voice clearly, whining to someone in the background. It sounded like our mother. "I am telling you, Mom, the event planner is demanding payment up front." Waverly was complaining, her voice nasal and frantic. I do not understand why Sutton is being such a stubborn bitch. If she would just answer her phone and send me the money, I would not be in this mess. She makes so much money doing her boring little box shipping job. I heard my mother's voice reply, muffled but distinct. Just give her time, Waverly. Sutton always caves. She is a broken ATM right now because she is throwing a tantrum, but once she realizes she needs us, she will pay up. She always does. I sat frozen in my ergonomic office chair, listening to my own mother and sister discuss me as if I were a piece of machinery that had stopped dispensing cash. They did not miss me. They only missed my utility. I hung up the phone. My hands were shaking so violently I had to grip the edge of my mahogany desk to steady myself. They had stolen my identity. They had ruined my credit. And they were sitting in Connecticut right now, waiting for me to come crawling back so they could drain me completely. The sadness I had carried for 28 years vanished in that moment. It evaporated, leaving behind something entirely new. Something cold, sharp, and terrifyingly focused. Rage. I immediately called the credit bureau. It took me 3 hours of jumping through bureaucratic hoops, providing identification, and threatening legal action before a supervisor finally emailed me the full documentation regarding the loan. I opened the PDF file on my computer monitor. There it was. A commercial business loan for $150,000. The primary borrower was Waverly. But right beneath her signature, acting as the cosigner and financial guarantor, was my name. Sutton. Along with my social security number, my old home address, and a signature that looked like a clumsy forgery of my handwriting. My parents had my social security number memorized from when they filled out my financial aid forms in college. They had used my spotless financial history to secure a massive loan for Waverly's failing business, because neither of them had the credit to do it themselves. And then, Waverly had stopped paying it. $150,000. I picked up my phone and dialed my mother's number. It rang twice before she answered. "Well, look who finally decided to join the family again," Marin said, her tone dripping with smug satisfaction. "I told Waverly you would come to your senses eventually. Are you ready to apologize for ruining Thanksgiving?" I did not yell. My voice was dangerously quiet. "I know about the loan, Mom." The smugness on the other end vanished instantly. There was a heavy, suffocating silence. "I am looking at the paperwork right now," I continued, my voice shaking with a fury I could barely contain. "You and Dad gave Waverly my social security number. You forged my signature. You committed identity theft and federal fraud to take out $150,000 in my name." There was a rustling sound. Then, Marin's voice came back, not apologetic, but defensive and shrill. "Oh, stop using such ugly words, Sutton. Fraud? Do not be ridiculous. We are family. Waverly needed an infusion of cash to keep her business afloat. You make good money, you have perfect credit, and she is your sister. We knew you would help her if you were not being so dramatic and selfish all the time." I squeezed my eyes shut. The sheer audacity of her logic was staggering. "You stole my identity, Mom. My mortgage was just denied. You ruined my credit score. You do not need a house right now." She snapped back, angry that I was not complying. "You are single. Waverly has a baby on the way. She needs this more than you do. You will easily pay this off in a few years. Just consider it your contribution to the family. Now stop acting like a victim and step up for your sister. Put Dad on the phone," I demanded. "He does not want to talk to you when you are being hysterical. Put him on the damn phone." I roared, the volume of my own voice shocking me. A few seconds later, I heard the heavy breathing of my father. "Sutton? Listen, honey, your mother is right. It is just money. We did not want to bother you with the details." "You stood there and watched her commit a felony, Dad," I whispered, a single tear escaping down my cheek. "You let her steal my future for Waverly. Do you have anything to say for yourself?" A long, agonizing pause. Then my father sighed, his signature move of avoiding conflict. "Just, do not make this a bigger deal than it is, Sutton. Keep the peace." Click. He hung up. I dropped the phone on my desk. I buried my face in my hands and let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. The betrayal was so absolute, so complete, it felt like my organs had been scooped out. My office door opened. Tamsin, my boss and mentor, stepped inside. She was a fierce, no-nonsense executive who had taken me under her wing years ago. She saw me completely broken over my desk and immediately locked the door behind her. "What happened?" she asked, sitting in the chair opposite me. I told her everything. Tamsin's face darkened with a rage that matched my own. "Call the police right now, Sutton," she ordered. "Report the identity theft. Send them to jail. That is fraud." I shook my head, wiping my eyes. If I call the police now, they will just play the victim. They will tell the whole family I am a monster trying to imprison my pregnant sister and my poor aging parents. They will spin it. I need something foolproof. That evening, I went to the Morrison house. When I walked through the door, Beckett took one look at my pale face and immediately pulled me into a tight, grounding hug. I broke down in his arms. We moved to the study. I laid the printed loan documents on Sullivan's massive oak desk. Greer put on her reading glasses and reviewed the paperwork. As a former corporate attorney, her eyes scanned the forgery, the terms, the default notices. When she finished, she took off her glasses. Her blue eyes were cold as ice. "They did not just steal from you, Sutton," Greer said softly, her voice terrifyingly calm. "They tried to chain you to a sinking ship so they could stay afloat." "What do I do?" I asked, my voice trembling. Tamsin said I should go to the police. Greer leaned forward, clasping her hands together. "You could go to the police right now. The bank will investigate. It will take months, maybe years, and your sister might face a minor penalty while claiming it was a family misunderstanding. That is justice, yes. But it is messy." She tapped a manicured fingernail against the forged signature. "If you want to truly protect yourself, and if you want to make sure they can never, ever do this to you again, you do not just react. You plan. You let the rope play out until they hang themselves with it." I looked at Greer. I looked at Sullivan, who was nodding in agreement. And I looked at Beckett, who was holding my hand so tightly I felt brave. "Tell me what to do," I said. Greer smiled. A sharp, predatory smile. "First, you freeze your credit so they cannot bleed you for another dime. Second, you quietly start building an ironclad legal case with a fraud investigator I know. And third, you wait." Wait for what? Wait for them to realize that the scapegoat they tried to slaughter has become the wolf. 2 years passed. 2 years of absolute, unbroken silence from my biological family. I did exactly what Greer told me to do. I hired a private fraud investigator. We meticulously gathered every piece of evidence regarding the forged $150,000 loan. IP addresses, email trails, bank transfer records. I built a nuclear bomb of a legal case and locked it in a safe. I did not detonate it. Not yet. I let Waverly continue to drown in the interest rates she could not pay. I let the pressure build. In the meantime, I poured my rage into my career. I worked with a ruthless, calculated efficiency that amazed even Tamsin. When our company, Apex Logistics, acquired a massive rival firm, Tamsin was promoted to the C-suite, and she handed me her old crown. At 30 years old, I became the senior regional vice president of the Midwest. I had a corner office overlooking the Chicago skyline, a staff of 200 people, and the final signature authority on multi-million-dollar corporate contracts. My personal life was flourishing in a way I never thought possible. The Morrisons were no longer just the people I ate Sunday dinner with. They were my family. Sullivan gave me away at a mock father-daughter dance at a charity gala. Greer took me wedding dress shopping when Beckett, my brilliant, steadfast Beckett, got down on one knee in the middle of a snowy park and asked me to be his wife. I said yes before he could even open the ring box. Life was perfect. And then, the universe delivered the most poetic, ironic twist of fate I could have ever asked for. I was sitting in my corner office on a Tuesday morning, reviewing vendor proposals for Apex Logistics' upcoming annual corporate retreat and client appreciation gala. It was a massive event. The budget was $3.2 million. Winning this contract would make any event planning agency set for the next 5 years. My assistant, a sharp young guy named Leo, walked in and placed a glossy black folder on my desk. "Here is the final bid from the boutique agency in Connecticut that the board liked," Leo said. They have a flashy presentation, but their financials look a little desperate. It is your call, Sutton. I opened the folder. The logo stared back at me in embossed gold letters. Waverly Elite Events. My breath stopped. I stared at the page. My sister, my golden child, toxic, identity-stealing sister, was bidding for a $3.2 million lifeline from my company. She was on the verge of bankruptcy from the loan she took out in my name, and she had no idea that the Apex VP of Operations she was begging for this contract was the very sister she had discarded. I leaned back in my leather chair. A slow, dangerous smile spread across my face. Waverly did not know my new title. She did not know my new last name. I had already started using Morrison professionally in anticipation of the wedding. To her, this was just a faceless corporate entity holding her salvation. Sutton? Leo asked, looking concerned. Do we reject them? They seem like a financial liability. I tapped my pen against the desk. The logical, corporate thing to do was to throw the bid in the trash. But Greer's voice echoed in my head. You let the rope play out until they hang themselves with it. No, Leo, I said softly. We do not reject them. In fact, I want you to approve them for the preliminary stage, but force them to sign a strict exclusivity clause. They cannot take on any other clients for the next 6 months while preparing for our gala. Furthermore, add a severe morality and fraud penalty clause. If the agency or its owner is found guilty of any financial crimes or ethical breaches, the contract is immediately terminated, and they owe Apex a penalty fee of 20%. Leo raised an eyebrow. That is a brutal contract. They would have to be desperate to sign that. If they mess up, they are instantly bankrupt. They will sign it, I said, closing the folder. Because they think they are untouchable. 2 days later, the contract was signed by Waverly and returned to my desk. She had walked right into the trap. She had committed all her agency's remaining resources to this one single event. Her entire livelihood now rested in the palm of my hand. The hand she had forged a signature with. That night, I went home to the townhouse Beckett, and I had finally bought together. We were sitting on the couch, drinking wine, looking at sample wedding invitations. Sutton, Beckett said gently, holding my hand. We need to fill out the top line of the invitations. The parents of the bride section. I looked at the blank space on the elegant paper. A familiar ache tugged at my chest, but it was quickly replaced by a profound clarity. I thought about Marin telling me to cancel my flight. I thought about Harrison standing in silence while my identity was stolen. And then I thought about Greer wiping my tears in a diner, and Sullivan teaching me chess, and the family that had caught me when I fell. I looked up at Beckett. I know exactly whose names are going on this invitation, I said. But I need to ask Greer and Sullivan a very important question first. If you think setting a trap like this is petty, you haven't seen anything yet. The storm is just gathering. Thank you for watching this far. If you are on my side, drop a comment saying, I'm Win. This is our secret code for everyone who watches deep into the video. I will be hearting and replying to every single comment that says, I'm Win. Keep watching, because the reveal at the wedding is going to be explosive. The following Sunday, I went to the Morrison house for our usual dinner. The weather was warming up, signaling the beginning of summer, and Greer was in the kitchen humming a jazz tune while pulling a roast out of the oven. Sullivan was setting the dining room table, carefully aligning the silverware just the way Greer liked it. I stood in the doorway of the dining room, clutching a blank wedding invitation in my hands. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I had faced down striking union workers and negotiated multi-million-dollar logistics contracts without breaking a sweat, but right now I felt like a terrified little girl. Sullivan noticed me hovering and paused, a linen napkin in his hand. Sutton? What is wrong, sweetheart? You look like you have seen a ghost. Greer wiped her hands on a towel and immediately walked over, her maternal radar instantly activated. What happened? Is it Beckett? Did something happen at work? No, I said quickly, my voice trembling slightly. No, everything is fine. I have a favor to ask. A really big favor. I walked over to the massive oak table and set the blank wedding invitation down on the polished wood. I pointed a shaking finger at the top line. the line that was traditionally reserved for the parents of the bride. "I do not have anyone to put on this line," I whispered, staring down at the elegant calligraphy. "Marin and Harrison. They lost the right to be on this paper a long time ago. They lost the right to give me away. But I do not want to walk down the aisle alone. I do not want to pretend that I am an orphan on the happiest day of my life. Because I am not an orphan. I have parents." I looked up. Sullivan was completely still. Greer had her hands clasped tightly in front of her chest, her piercing blue eyes rapidly filling with tears. I swallowed hard, pushing past the lump in my throat. "You took me in when I was crying over cold turkey in a diner. You taught me how to trust people again. You made me feel like I am worth something, just for being me. I do not want Marin and Harrison on my wedding invitation. I want you. Both of you." Greer let out a breath that sounded like a sob. She closed the distance between us and wrapped her arms around me so tightly I felt it in my bones. Sullivan wrapped his large arms around both of us, resting his chin on the top of my head. "We would be honored, Sutton," Sullivan said, his deep voice thick with emotion. "More than honored." Greer pulled back slightly, cupping my face in her hands. "You are already our daughter in every way that matters, Sutton. But if we are going to do this, I want to do it right. I want to make it official." I blinked, confused. "Official? What do you mean?" Greer smiled, her lawyer instincts kicking in beneath the tears. "Adult adoption. It is a legal process. We can petition the court to legally recognize you as our daughter. You will get a new birth certificate. You will legally be a Morrison. If you want that, of course." My breath caught in my throat. A new birth certificate. A legal severance from the people who had stolen my identity and treated me like trash. A permanent, undeniable bond with the people who had saved me. "Yes," I said, the tears finally spilling over. "Yes. Absolutely yes." Greer did not waste a single second. Within 48 hours, she had drafted the petition for adult adoption. Because all parties were consenting adults, the process was incredibly streamlined, but it still required a formal hearing before a family court judge. That is where Judge Declan came in. He was a formidable, no-nonsense judge who had known Greer for 30 years. 3 weeks before the wedding, we stood in his private chambers. I was wearing a sharp navy blue suit. Greer and Sullivan stood on either side of me, holding my hands. Judge Declan looked over the paperwork, adjusted his glasses, and looked down at me from his bench. "Miss Thatcher," he said, his voice echoing in the quiet room. "You understand that this legal action permanently severs your legal relationship with your biological parents? They will have no claim to you, and you will have no legal ties to them." I looked at the judge. I thought about the $150,000 loan. I thought about the Thanksgiving rejection. I thought about 28 years of being invisible. "I understand, Your Honor," I said clearly, without a single tremor in my voice. "That is exactly what I want." Judge Declan nodded slowly. He picked up his pen and signed the bottom of the decree. "Then, by the power vested in me by the state of Illinois, I declare you legally adopted. Congratulations, Sutton Morrison." I broke down. I hugged Greer. I hugged Sullivan. I was a Morrison. It was the best day of my life. But of course, a secret that big in my family could not stay buried forever. A week before the wedding, the flying monkey struck. Aunt Fallon, who spent an unhealthy amount of time scrolling through social media, had stumbled upon a public post from the floral vendor tagging my wedding venue. She had done some digging, found the public registry, and immediately reported back to the mothership. I was sitting on my couch with Beckett when my phone buzzed. It was a text message from Marin. The first direct communication in over 2 years. I read the text out loud to Beckett. "Your Aunt Fallon just told me you are getting married next week in Chicago. I cannot believe you are going to do this without your own family. How embarrassing for us if people found out. Waverly, your father, and I have booked flights. We will be there. Do not make a scene and do not embarrass this family." I stared at the screen. The sheer narcissism was breathtaking. She did not say congratulations. She did not ask how I was doing. She was only concerned that her image would be tarnished if her friends found out she was not invited to her own daughter's wedding. And she was bringing Waverly. Beckett looked at the phone, his jaw tightening. Tell security to ban them at the door. I will hire extra guards. They are not ruining our day, Sutton. I thought about it. I really did. It would be so easy to just block them at the gate and enjoy my day in peace. But then I remembered the $3.2 million contract sitting in a safe in my office. I remembered the forged signature. I remembered the years of being told I was small, toxic, and unimportant. If I blocked them at the door, Maren would just spend the rest of her life telling the extended family that I was a cruel, heartless daughter who turned her loving parents away. She would twist the narrative, just like she always did. I needed to end the narrative permanently. I needed an audience. I needed them to see exactly what they had lost and exactly who they were dealing with now. I typed a reply, my fingers flying across the screen. Just come. I hit send, locked my phone, and smiled at Beckett. Let them come, I said softly. They're about to get the front row seats they deserve. The wedding took place at the Chicago Botanic Garden. It was a breathtaking venue, a massive glass conservatory filled with exotic orchids, cascading greenery, and thousands of twinkling fairy lights reflecting off the glass ceiling. It was not the gaudy, over-the-top ballroom Waverly would have demanded. It was elegant, grounded, and intensely beautiful. I stood in the bridal suite, looking at myself in the full-length mirror. I was wearing a sleek, form-fitting silk gown with a dramatic train. My hair was swept up, and I wore a simple diamond necklace that Sullivan had given me that morning. I did not look like the terrified, desperate girl they used to bully. I looked like a woman who owned her world. Greer stood behind me, gently securing my veil. You look powerful, she whispered, meeting my eyes in the mirror. I feel powerful, I replied. Outside in the main conservatory, the string quartet was playing, and the guests were taking their seats. We had about 150 guests. Top executives from Apex Logistics, Sullivan's powerful friends from the shipping industry, and Beckett's engineering colleagues. It was a room filled with genuine wealth and quiet power. And then, my biological family arrived. I was watching the entrance through a discreet monitor in the bridal suite. I saw them walk through the main archway, and I actually had to laugh at the sheer predictability of it all. Maren marched in first, wearing a dark, heavily sequined gown that looked more appropriate for a red carpet than a garden wedding. Harrison trailed behind her, looking deeply uncomfortable in a suit that was 10 years out of date. But it was Waverly who truly stole the show. Waverly strutted into my wedding wearing a floor-length, form-fitting, blindingly white lace dress. It was practically a wedding gown. She even had a silver tiara woven into her hair. She was holding a designer clutch, looking around the room with an expression of pure, unfiltered entitlement. She had clearly come with one goal, to upstage the bride and make sure everyone knew she was the center of attention. Maren immediately locked eyes with the VIP table at the very front, right next to the altar. The table with the place cards that read parents of the bride. I watched on the monitor as Maren nudged Waverly, and the three of them began to march down the center aisle, intending to claim the best seats in the house. They expected the red carpet. They expected everyone to bow down to the grieving family who had graciously decided to forgive the prodigal daughter. They did not make it past the fifth row. Two men in crisp dark suits, off-duty police officers I had hired as private security, stepped smoothly into the aisle, blocking their path. "Excuse me," Maren said loudly, her voice echoing over the string quartet. "We are the parents of the bride. And this is her sister. Move aside. We are sitting at the front." One of the security guards, a massive man named Marcus, did not even blink. "I am sorry, ma'am. The front tables are reserved. I have your seating assignments right here." He pulled out a clipboard. Maren's face turned a violent shade of red. "Reserved? I am the mother of the bride. Who else would those seats be reserved for?" Marcus gestured politely toward the very back of the conservatory. To the darkest corner, near the kitchen's swinging doors and the restrooms. "You are seated at table 19, ma'am. Please follow me." Waverly gasped, clutching her designer bag. "Table 19? That is practically in the parking lot. Do you know who we are?" Marcus remained an absolute stonewall. "Table 19, ma'am. Or the exit. Your choice." I watched Marin's jaw clench so hard I thought her teeth would shatter. She looked around, realizing that several high-powered executives were beginning to stare at the loud woman in the sequins. Not wanting to cause a scene in front of wealthy strangers, Marin grabbed Waverly's arm and dragged her toward the back of the room, fuming. Harrison simply followed, head down, taking his place in the shadows. The contrast was glorious. They tried to project this image of superiority, dressed in their loud, desperate clothes, but they were sitting in the overflow section, entirely irrelevant to the power and love filling the rest of the room. It was time. The music swelled. The heavy wooden doors opened. I linked my arm through Sullivan's, and we began to walk down the aisle. I kept my eyes fixed on Beckett, who was standing at the altar looking so incredibly handsome and deeply emotional that it took my breath away. But in the periphery of my vision, I could feel the burning glare of my mother and sister from table 19. I did not look at them. I did not give them the satisfaction of a single glance. I belonged to the man beside me and the man waiting for me. The ceremony was perfect. When Judge Declan, who had graciously agreed to officiate, pronounced us husband and wife, the entire glass conservatory erupted in applause. Beckett kissed me, the world spun, and for an hour, I completely forgot about the toxic storm brewing in the back corner. We took our photos, we mingled during the cocktail hour, and then it was time for the reception dinner. I sat at the sweetheart table with Beckett, our hands intertwined. The room was glowing with candlelight. Waiters were pouring expensive champagne into crystal flutes. The atmosphere was electric. Then, the MC, a charismatic guy from Beckett's firm, stepped up to the microphone in the center of the dance floor. The music faded out. "Ladies and gentlemen," the MC announced, his voice booming over the speakers. "If I could have your attention, please. Before we bring out the first course, we have a very special toast. We would like to formally recognize the incredible people who made this beautiful evening possible." From my vantage point, I saw Marin sit up straight at table 19. She adjusted her sequined dress. She patted her hair. She leaned forward, clearly preparing to stand up, wave to the crowd, and accept the adulation she believed was her divine right. Waverly smirked, adjusting her tiara. "Please put your hands together," the MC continued, raising his glass, "for the parents of the bride." Marin stood up. She actually pushed her chair back and stood up, a wide, plastic smile plastered across her face. The MC did not miss a beat. The wonderful, loving, and deeply generous Mr. Sullivan and Mrs. Greer Morrison. The room exploded into thunderous applause. Sullivan and Greer stood up from their VIP table at the very front of the room. They smiled warmly, raising their glasses to the crowd, and then turned to raise their glasses to me and Beckett. The guests cheered louder. Some of Sullivan's trucking buddies even whistled. And at table 19, surrounded by swinging kitchen doors and confused waiters, Marin Thatcher froze. She was standing up, waving at a crowd that was not looking at her. She was smiling at a room that had no idea who she was. The plastic smile slowly melted off her face, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated horror. Waverly stopped adjusting her tiara. Her mouth fell open. They stared at Greer and Sullivan. They stared at the MC. And then, Marin's eyes locked onto mine across the massive room. I did not look away. I raised my champagne glass, looked directly into my mother's horrified eyes, and took a slow, deliberate sip. The micro drop was coming. And it was going to be biblical. The applause died down, and guests began taking their seats as the first course was served. But Marin did not sit down. She stood at table 19, her chest heaving, her hands balled into fists at her sides. She looked like a teapot about to whistle. I knew that look. That was the look she got right before she unleashed a hurricane of verbal abuse designed to make me feel 2 inches tall. She pushed past her chair, shoved a waiter out of her way, and began marching across the dining room floor. Waverly was hot on her heels, the white lace dress swishing angrily behind her. Harrison scurried after them, frantically whispering for them to sit down. They marched straight up to the sweetheart table, completely ignoring the bewildered stares of the high-profile guests around us. "What is the meaning of this?" Marin hissed, her voice vibrating with barely contained rage. She slammed her hands down on the edge of my table. Who the hell are those people? Why did that man just call them your parents? I did not flinch. I carefully set my champagne flute down, folded my hands in my lap, and looked at her. Those are my parents, Mom, I said calmly. Sullivan and Greer. Waverly let out a sharp, mocking laugh. Are you insane, Sutton? Are you actually delusional? You cannot just hire fake parents for your wedding to punish us. That is pathetic, even for you. I am not punishing you, Waverly, I replied, keeping my voice perfectly modulated. And I did not hire them. They adopted me. Marin blinked. The absolute certainty in her eyes wavered for a fraction of a second. Adopted you? You are almost 30 years old. You cannot be adopted. Actually, Mrs. Thatcher, a deep, commanding voice interrupted. You absolutely can. We all turned. Judge Declan had stepped away from his table and was standing a few feet away, holding a glass of sparkling water. He looked at Marin with the kind of judicial disdain usually reserved for repeat offenders. Adult adoption is a fully recognized legal process in the state of Illinois, Judge Declan continued, his voice carrying clearly over the quiet hum of the room. I should know. I am the judge who signed the decree. As of 3 weeks ago, Sutton's legal surname is Morrison. You have no legal relationship to the bride whatsoever. Marin staggered backward as if she had been physically slapped. Her face went entirely pale. She looked from the judge, to me, and then to Greer, who was watching the scene with cold, terrifying calm from her table. You legally replaced us? Marin whispered, the realization finally breaking through her narcissism. You erased us? I did not erase you, I said, my voice hardening. You erased me the night you told me to cancel my flight because I was a toxic burden to the golden child. You erased me when you chose her comfort over my existence. I just made it official. Waverly stepped forward, her face twisted in an ugly sneer. Oh, please. You are just throwing a massive temper tantrum because you are jealous. You always have been. You think you are so powerful now, sitting here in your fancy dress with your fake family. But you are still just the boring, bitter sister who works in a warehouse while I actually have a business. I looked at Waverly. I looked at the glaring white dress she wore to my wedding. And I felt the trap snap shut. Speaking of your business, Waverly, I said smoothly. How is Waverly Elite Events doing? Are you excited about the upcoming corporate gala you are planning? Waverly froze. Her sneer faltered. What? How do you know about that? I gestured to the side of the room. Tamsin, my mentor and the current chief operating officer of Apex Logistics, stepped out of the crowd. She was wearing a stunning emerald green suit and holding a familiar black folder. Tamsin walked over to the table and handed the folder directly to Waverly. Waverly took it, her hands shaking slightly. She opened it. It was the $3.2 million exclusivity contract. The contract that required her to drop all other clients and bet her entire financial future on Apex Logistics. Waverly, this is Tamsin, I said pleasantly. She is the COO of Apex Logistics. And as of last month, I am the Senior Regional Vice President of the Midwest. That corporate gala you bid on? That is my event. You signed a contract with my company. Waverly's eyes darted from the contract to my face. The color drained from her cheeks. You're the VP? But the contract is signed. It is binding. We are doing the event. You have to pay me. Tamsin smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. Actually, Waverly, we do not. Please refer to Section 4, Paragraph B of the contract you signed. The Morality and Fraud Penalty Clause. Waverly flipped the page frantically, her breathing shallow and rapid. What are you talking about? I haven't committed any fraud. Yes, you have, I said, leaning forward, the pleasantness dropping from my voice entirely. 2 years ago, you and Mom used my social security number to take out a commercial loan for $150,000. You forged my signature as a guarantor. That is identity theft. That is federal bank fraud. Marin let out a sharp gasp. Harrison, standing behind them, visibly flinched. Because you are currently under investigation for financial fraud, Tamsin stated firmly, Apex Logistics is immediately terminating your contract for cause. Furthermore, per the penalty clause you agreed to, you now owe Apex 20% of the total contract value for breach of ethics. That is $640,000. Due in 30 days. The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear a pin drop on the carpet. Waverly dropped the black folder. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a terror so pure it almost looked like madness. $640,000? Waverly choked out, her voice barely a whisper. Plus the loan. I do not have that. I do not have any of that. I will be bankrupt. I will go to prison. I looked at her without an ounce of pity. You should have thought about that before you stole my identity to fund your tiaras. Marin snapped out of her shock. She slammed her hands on the table again, leaning into my face. You malicious little bitch. You set this up. You set your own sister up to destroy her. You are going to cancel that penalty right now. I am not canceling anything, I said softly. Then we will just tell the bank it was a misunderstanding. Marin yelled, losing complete control. We will say we had your permission. You have no proof. I smiled. A cold, surgical smile. I reached under the table, picked up a manila envelope, and tossed it right onto the center of the sweetheart table. Oh, Mom. I have so much proof, it is going to make your head spin. Marin stared at the manila envelope as if it were a live grenade. What is that? She whispered, the aggressive fire in her voice suddenly extinguishing, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. That, I said, leaning back in my chair and lacing my fingers together, is the culmination of a 2-year private investigation. IP addresses proving the loan application was submitted from your home computer in Connecticut. Email transcripts between you and the loan officer where you claim to be me. A forensic handwriting analysis proving the signature on the guarantor line was forged by you, Mom. I tapped the envelope. And a certified police report for identity theft, filed with both the Chicago Police Department and the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Marin's face went completely, terrifyingly blank. The muscles in her neck strained as she tried to process the sheer magnitude of the trap she had walked into. She grabbed the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white, swaying slightly as if the floor had dropped out from under her. Harrison stepped forward, catching her arm before she collapsed. For the first time in 28 years, my father looked directly into my eyes without looking away. His face was weathered, gray, and glistening with tears. Sutton. Harrison croaked, his voice cracking. Oh my God. Sutton, what have you done? I did not do this, Dad, I replied, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. You did. You stood in the living room and watched your wife commit a felony to buy Waverly another failed business, and you told me to keep the peace. You threw me on the tracks to save her. I just refused to get run over. I am sorry, Harrison wept, burying his face in his hands. I am so sorry. I was a coward. I just wanted everything to be quiet. I should have protected you. I looked at him, the man who had been my father. I felt a brief, hollow ache in my chest, but no anger. Just pity. Sorry does not pay back $150,000, Dad, I said quietly. And sorry does not keep you out of federal court. Waverly, who had been staring at the floor in a catatonic state, suddenly snapped. The reality of the numbers, the original loan, the massive corporate penalty, the impending bankruptcy, finally broke her reality. She turned on Marin like a rabid animal. This is your fault. Waverly screamed, shoving Marin's shoulder. You told me it was fine. You told me Sutton would never find out, and even if she did, she was too weak to do anything about it. You told me to sign the papers. Marin stumbled back, looking at her golden child in absolute shock. Waverly, honey, please calm down. Do not tell me to calm down. Waverly shrieked, the silver tiara slipping askew in her hair. I am going to jail. My business is dead. You ruined my life. Marin reached out, her hands shaking, trying to placate the monster she had created. We will fix it, sweetie. We will sell the house. We will dip into the retirement fund. We will pay it all off, I promise. Waverly slapped her mother's hands away. Your retirement fund will not even cover half of the corporate penalty. You are useless." The sheer venom in Waverly's voice made several guests gasp. It was a stunning display of pure, toxic entitlement turning on its creator. Maren realized, in front of 150 people, that the daughter she had sacrificed everything for did not love her. Waverly only loved what Maren could give her. And now that Maren had nothing left to give, Waverly looked at her with pure disgust. Desperate, utterly broken, Maren turned back to me. The arrogance was entirely gone. The fierce, commanding mother who had banished me from Thanksgiving was dead. In her place was a pathetic, terrified woman begging for mercy from a stranger. "Sutton, please," Maren sobbed, dropping to her knees right in front of the sweetheart table. "Please. I am begging you. Do not give that envelope to the police. Waverly has a baby. She is a mother. I will do anything. We will pay you back every cent. Just drop the charges. Please, Sutton. You are my daughter." I looked down at the woman on her knees. 28 years of yearning for her love. 28 years of wanting her to look at me, to choose me, to protect me. If she had done this 5 years ago, I might have caved. I might have picked her up, dried her tears, and let her destroy my life all over again. But I was not that girl anymore. I was a Morrison. "I am not your daughter, Maren," I said, my voice echoing in the absolute silence of the room. "I am just the bank account you tried to drain. The police already have copies of everything in that envelope. It is out of my hands." Maren let out a wail that sounded like a wounded animal. "Security," Beckett said, his voice booming with authority as he stood up beside me. "Please escort these uninvited guests off the premises." Immediately, Marcus and 3 other guards descended on the table. They grabbed Maren by the arms, hauling her to her feet. They flanked Waverly and Harrison. As they were being dragged backward toward the exit, Maren screamed my name. Waverly was sobbing hysterically, her white dress dragging on the floor. Harrison just walked with his head down, a broken man. I watched them go until the heavy wooden doors of the conservatory slammed shut behind them, cutting off the noise. The silence that followed was heavy. Then, Sullivan stood up from his table. He picked up his champagne glass, walked over to the sweetheart table, and put a massive, comforting hand on my shoulder. He looked out at the stunned crowd. "Well," Sullivan boomed, his voice warm and commanding, "I believe we have a wedding to celebrate. And my daughter looks like she could use a piece of cake." The tension broke. The guests erupted into cheers and applause. The string quartet immediately struck up a lively, joyful tune. Beckett pulled me into his arms and kissed me fiercely, and for the rest of the night, we danced. I did not think about Maren or Harrison or Waverly. I was completely, entirely free. 1 year later, I was sitting on the back patio of our townhouse, a cup of hot coffee in my hand, watching the morning sun hit the river. The air was crisp, the world was quiet, and sleeping soundly in a bassinet next to my chair was my 3-month-old daughter, Maya. Maya Morrison. Beckett stepped out onto the patio, wrapping a thick blanket around my shoulders and kissing the top of my head before sitting in the chair next to me. He looked at Maya, his eyes softening with that incredible, unconditional love that still took my breath away. "Did you see the news?" Beckett asked quietly, keeping his voice low so he wouldn't wake the baby. I took a sip of my coffee. "No." "Did the verdict come down?" Beckett nodded, pulling up a digital news article on his phone. He handed it to me. The headline was small, buried in the local Connecticut business section, but to me, it was written in neon lights. "Local event planner sentenced in federal identity theft case." I read through the article. The hammer had finally fallen. Waverly had pleaded guilty to federal bank fraud and identity theft to avoid a massive trial. She avoided actual prison time because she had a young child, but she was sentenced to 5 years of strict probation, 1,000 hours of community service, and full financial restitution of the $150,000 loan. Her event planning business was completely liquidated. And because of the massive corporate penalty she owed Apex Logistics, a penalty Tamsin ruthlessly pursued in civil court, Waverly was utterly bankrupt. But she was not the only one paying the price. According to Aunt Fallon, who had tried to reach out to me a few months ago before I blocked her number permanently, Marin and Harrison had sold their house and drained their entire retirement fund trying to cover Waverly's legal fees and keep her out of a jail cell. They were now living in a tiny, cramped apartment on the outskirts of town. The golden child had finally cost them everything. And in return, Waverly blamed them for the entire fiasco, barely speaking to them except to demand free childcare. They were trapped in a miserable, toxic loop of their own making. I handed the phone back to Beckett. I looked at the screen for a second longer, feeling nothing. No guilt. No triumph. Just a profound, quiet peace. "Are you okay?" Beckett asked, searching my face. I looked down at Maya. She stirred in her sleep, her tiny hand gripping the edge of her blanket. "I am perfect," I said softly. People on the internet, especially the flying monkeys in my extended family who heard the story, called me ruthless. They said I went too far. They said that family is family, blood is blood, and you never turn your back on your own mother and sister, no matter what they do to you. They said bringing the police into a family matter and publicly replacing my parents at my wedding was an act of cold-blooded revenge. But they are wrong. Setting boundaries with toxic people is not revenge. Refusing to let someone set your life on fire just to keep themselves warm is not cruel. It is survival. For 28 years, I let my biological family use me as a human shield. I let them belittle my achievements, steal my resources, and tell me that my need for basic respect was a toxic burden. I shrank myself down so small I almost disappeared, just hoping they would finally look at me and decide I was worthy of their love. But the truth is, toxic people do not change just because you love them harder. They do not suddenly grow a conscience because you sacrifice your own happiness for them. They will take and take and take until there is nothing left of you. The night Marin told me to cancel my Thanksgiving flight, I thought my life was over. I thought being uninvited to my own family's table was the ultimate failure. Instead, it was the greatest gift they ever gave me. Because sitting alone in that diner, crying over a cold plate of turkey, I met a woman who looked at me and decided I was worth a seat at her table. I met a family who did not care how much money I made or what I could do for them. They just cared about me. I look at Sullivan and Greer now, playing on the floor with their granddaughter. I look at Beckett, who builds me up every single day. And I look at my beautiful daughter, Maya, who will grow up knowing exactly what unconditional love looks like. She will never have to earn her place in this family. She will never be a backup plan. I chose my family, and they chose me back. If you are watching this, and you are the scapegoat in your family, if you are the one who is always called dramatic for pointing out bad behavior, or if you are constantly told to keep the peace while someone else destroys your mental health, I need you to hear me. You are not the problem. You are not a burden. And you do not owe your life to people who treat you like an ATM and a punching bag just because you share the same DNA. You have the power to walk away. You have the right to protect your peace, your finances, and your future. It will hurt. It will be terrifying. But on the other side of that fear is a life so beautiful, you will wonder why you didn't leave sooner. Some people say I went too far by letting my sister face the legal consequences of her actions and replacing my parents publicly. They say I should have forgiven them because they are family. But was I wrong for protecting my peace, my credit, and my new family from their toxicity? Tell me your verdict in the comments below. Be honest. Did I go too far, or did they get exactly what they deserved? Thank you so much for watching. If my story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and share this video. It helps the channel grow, and it might just help someone else realize they have the power to walk away from a toxic family. Stay strong, protect your peace, and I will see you in the next story.